shallow to everyone. Now, that is a word very much relevant to the times that we are living. We know shalom basically means peace. It also means completion and well-being also. Living in these challenging times, we need the shalom that passeth all understanding that Paul spoke about. Right? The times are really challenging. No two words about it. And people want to know the truth. Sadly, through the main media or social media, so much of misinformation, or some call it disinformation, is also propagated. People are rather confused as to what is true and what is not. We need to have a reliable source. But before that, let's look at what is happening around the world, what you can relate to. Right? Two things that govern the lives of people as well as the families and all are the economy. We call it cost of living or whatever. And then the kind of government that rules a country. Right? So they say democratic, and democratic countries are bringing in rather strict laws that they say violate their human rights, as well as those countries where dictatorships are there. But anyway, those things all have an indirect impact upon the lives of the people. I believe many of you know that there's a process called the Great Reset. In the past, it was very difficult for someone living in the West to control those who were living in the East or Asia. But today, being in their own homes, they can control what is happening the world over. Because satellites have been sent up and the entire world can be viewed right from your living room. So, you have heard of this Great Reset, right? This person called Klaus Martin Schwab, he started what is called the European Management Forum in 1971. It was renamed World Economic Forum in 1987 and was recognized as an international institution by the Swiss government in 2015. Now, they are the ones who are manipulating the economy of the world. As their practice, every year they have the AGM at the beginning of the year at Davos, the Swiss resort, and this year also they had that with all kinds of tycoons, celebrities and various leaders attending. Only selected media channels were allowed to get in. Only they had access to record and broadcast what was going on. Certain media channels were forbidden or prohibited from getting in there. So that means they have some secret agenda. Now they have a vast army of young people spread over 150 countries. They live in about 430 cities. They are all global shapers, not country developers, global shapers. So they are not interested in the country, but how to implement the global economic agenda in the whole world. Now, we know those who live in so-called developing countries have to depend on aid given to them by various organizations like the World Bank, IMF or Asian Development Bank. Now they do not give that aid unless the country is willing to implement their instructions. We all know that. And if some country, economically sound country, still do not follow the guidelines given by certain powerful countries, again they will have to face a backlash. That's what happened to India recently when they bought gas from Russia. So, like that, nobody's safe. No country can say we are doing only what is good for our country. All have to fall in line with this global economic reset. So, that's one challenge normal people will face. There's nothing they can do as the governments take decisions as dictated to them by these global shapers. That's about the economy. Now, these people, they have the agenda to control the countries by planting their chosen leaders or their chosen people as leaders. Now, when young students go for their studies to higher institutions, these global reshapers or those who are bringing in this global government, they have their scouts and they pick up smart students and then they get them onto their side. Now, this is something that has been happening the world over. Right? Any organization does that. Even sports people, they send their scouts to see if someone is a talented soccerite or a cricketer or a tennis player or whatever, and they are chosen, they are selected, and they are given special training. Now that kind of thing happens all the time. But these people, now they say, even Angela Merkel, Justin Trudeau, Macron, all have been pre-selected as they were doing their studies. So that's what happens. The British parliamentary system is called the mother of the parliamentary system. I'll just give you a little bit of statistics. In 2010, at that time, Gordon Brown was the Prime Minister of England. And 2010, he had to resign. And then David Cameron succeeded him. Of course, that was a coalition type of government. And in 2015, elections were held. And the Conservative Party that David Cameron represented won with a majority. So since 1990s, a Conservative majority government came into existence in England, 2015. And then the next year, 2016, David Cameron had to resign over Brexit, making way for the second lady Prime Minister of England called Theresa May to come into power. And then 2019, she had to resign. And Boris Johnson came into power. He became the Prime Minister. And we know on the 7th of July, Boris Johnson also had to resign. Now they are waiting until the next Conservative leader is elected. So you see, within 12 years, 4 consecutive Prime Ministers of England had to resign. They were not defeated in an election, ousted through an election. They had to resign. So something is happening here. Just to show that what is going on in the world is not something that had been happening for centuries. Of course, this kind of thing has happened in the past. Margaret Thatcher, who was called the Iron Lady, the longest serving Prime Minister of England in the last century. 15 years or so, she was the Prime Minister. And she had to resign over this joining the European Union issue. And it is on record that she left number 10 Downing Street in tears. So that is about England. Now, how about the rest of the world? You have heard about, maybe most of you have heard about the Cuban crisis during the time John F. Kennedy was the president. And the leader of USSR, Communist Russia, was called Nikita Khrushchev. And it was sort of resolved with America winning the issue and Then what happened? David Rockefeller went on his annual vacation. Now, where do super capitalists like David Rockefeller go on vacation? Maybe Swiss Alps, Isle of Capri, Hawaiian Islands, or maybe he could have even come to Sri Lanka, which was called Ceylon at the time. But this super capitalist for his vacation went to Moscow, the capital of the communist regime, Soviet capital. At the same time, Nikita Khrushchev was on his vacation near the Black Sea. That's where they go, just like those in Egypt go to Alexandria port city. So afterwards, David Rockefeller came back. Once he completed his vacation, Nikita Khrushchev went to Moscow and he was told he is no longer the leader of USSR. They appointed two others called Leonid Brezhnev as the president and Alexei Kosygin as the prime minister. For all appearances, it seems the super capitalist David Rockefeller went to Moscow, sacked the prime minister of USSR and appointed two others and came back. That's how it appears. So then what happened to Kennedy? He was assassinated. They captured a person called Lee Harvey Oswald, but before he could be charged in the courts, he was killed by a guy called Jack Ruby. So after that, they appointed a commission with the then Chief Justice of United States called Warren Commission, and they gave a report, but there are still questions as to the veracity of that report. So it's like that things have been happening down the centuries. Even Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. And recently, the former Prime Minister of Japan, Abe, is assassinated. What's happening here? So it appears that all those who do not fall in line with the agenda of these globalists, who are also called the elite, will be taken care of or eliminated. So that's what is happening in the world over. Now this is not something new. This is what the Bible speaks about. Now when it comes to the Bible, some have this idea it is an ancient book. It has no relevance to today. But let me tell you, it is more modern than the present age that we are living in. What is happening today is what the Bible has predicted down the centuries or millennia, and Bible also talks about what will be happening in the future, and also what could happen for the next 1,000 years. So Bible is more modern than any of us. Now, to truly understand how reliable the Bible is, let's look at the book of Daniel. The book of Daniel, he predicted the world empires that would come after his time. And in Daniel chapter 11, he so clearly identified certain rulers that would arise in Egypt as well as in Greece, without giving their names but giving the various characteristics. Some people said it could not have been written by Daniel because it was so accurate. It would have been written by somebody using the name of Daniel after the events happened, because they were so accurate. But none of these people put forward the name of another person who could have written those things, if not Daniel. That is one. Second thing is, in any book, there are certain things called internal evidence. In every book in the Bible also there's this thing called internal evidence. And what is there as internal evidence to show this book was written during the time of Daniel is this. That book has 12 chapters. 6 of them are written in Hebrew. Chapter 1, just 1. Then chapters 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 are written in Aramaic. Then from chapter 8 to chapter 12, again in Hebrew. Out of the 12 are written in Hebrew, that relates directly to Israel. What relates to the Gentile world is written in Aramaic. Now, no other book in the Bible has that kind of uniform differentiation. So that shows this book had been written during the time of Daniel. And Daniel may have been the wisest man since King Solomon to have lived on this earth up to that time. So that clearly indicates it was written by someone who lived during that time, and the only person who is qualified to do that kind of thing, he was Daniel. But for Christians, there's even further proof. Matthew 24 verse 15, Christ quotes and says, the abomination of desolation that Daniel spoke about. So Daniel 9:27, 11:36 have this phrase called abomination of desolation. He knew what he was talking about. For all those who accept Christ, even as a good teacher, will have to admit, okay, that was written by Daniel. Now in Daniel chapter 7, he says, he saw the 4 winds churning the sea. Right? The 4 winds represent the 4 seasons. Now remember, in the Bible there are lots of symbolizations, lots of symbols. If God gave at one of those ancient people vision of a modern day superhighway, vehicles running around in the night. Now, how could that person describe what he saw? Let me read to you from the Bible. There was a person called Nahum who lived about 650 years ago. That was even about 50 years before Daniel. And this is what is right in what you call chapter 2, verse 4. Chariots storm through broad straits. Now the only vehicle he knew were chariots, horse-driven ones. So instead of saying motor vehicle, he said chariots storm through, that's going at high speed, in broad roads. Broad roads. So you see now, the Romans were the people who built very good roads up to that time. But this was long before Romans. I mean, at biblical times they were the Romans, but this was long before Romans came into power. So you would have seen very narrow, muddy lanes kind of thing during his time. So for him, a highway, the broadness of it would have been very vast. Then he goes on to say, rushing back and forth through the spaces or squares. Right? Now you can picture a highway and see how accurate that is. They look like flaming torches. Now he didn't have the word headlights. This is flaming torches. And then he says, they move at the speed of lightning. Right? For a person who has only seen chariots, the speed of motor vehicles would have seemed like lightning. They had to use the words they were familiar with in order to describe what they saw. So when we read the Bible, at times we have to focus and see how or what are the things they are describing. Okay, even the translators would have had this problem, as we'll see later on. So, in Daniel chapter 7, verse 2, he says, these four winds, we know four seasons, were churning the sea because the sea covered the entire world, and at that time they did not have the phrase international arena. So what happened, what we call in the international forum, they said happening in the sea. And he saw four empires arising, four beasts, right? Which we know are empires. First one was Babylon, like a lion. Second was like a bear having 3 ribs, right? So the 3 ribs were the three, that was the Medo-Persian Empire that Koresh or Cyrus really established. And he defeated the Lydians. Then in 546 BC, he defeated Babylon in 538-39 BC. And also he defeated the Egyptian by 525 BC. So that's why 3 ribs in the mouth of that bear. Then he saw a leopard. Now, that is the Greek Empire. We know how quickly, how speedy Alexander conquered the then world. So leopard is a symbolization of speed. Then he saw another animal that he does not name, having iron teeth, ferocious animal. And we know Roman Empire succeeded the Greek Empire, and they were the ones who used iron weaponry more than anyone else back then. So that's why iron teeth. So the 4 empires he saw, and he was there until Koresh or Cyrus conquered Babylon. After that, he was an old man by that time. He had passed away. So he did not see the Greek and the Roman empires coming into existence. Now there's another thing that happens when you read the Bible. All of a sudden, things change, and what kind of a shift takes place. I see in Daniel chapter 11, verse 21 onwards, he speaks about this person who will come and desecrate the temple in Jerusalem and put up an abomination. Now, today we know that was Antiochus Epiphanes who conquered that entire area, and then he erected a statue of Zeus in the temple and even desecrated the altar, offering a female pig on it, kind of thing. And that's why what we call Hasmonean, or those wars came, Maccabean wars, until they redeemed the temple. And even today, Israeli people celebrate that. And even in the book of John chapter 10 verse 22, it says, Christ went to Jerusalem for the feast of dedication, which in Hebrew is feast of Hanukkah. But in 1136, all of a sudden, there is a shift. Verse 36, it says, the king will do as he pleases. He will exalt and magnify himself above every god, and will say unheard of things against the God of gods. He will be successful until the time of his wrath, until the time of the wrath is completed. But here it's very clear, he exalts himself above Zeus and all those. So that clearly shows it is somebody else and not Antiochus Epiphanes. In Ezekiel 28 verse 11, it says, prophesy against the king of Tyre. But in verse 14, it describes a person that seems perfect, adorned with all kinds of jewels and all that. And verse 14 says, you were in Eden with your wings spread out. And says, you anointed cherub in English, in Hebrew, cherub. Now, king of Tyre was never in Eden, neither was he perfect in wisdom, nor did he have any wings. So that is about the devil before his fall. So like that there are various shifts. So in Daniel chapter 7, verse 7, it says, this beast came up with 10 horns. And verse 8, there's a shift. In verse 7 itself, in the beginning, another horn comes up with eyes and a mouth, displacing 3 horns and speaking boastful or blasphemous words. That is what why in 1136 it is recorded there, that ruler will exalt himself above all gods and speak unheard of things against all the gods and the creator God, that is the God of Israel. So this is what takes place at times when we are studying scripture. So Daniel approaches one of the angels and asks for the explanation. And Daniel chapter 7 verse 23, he has written, he gave me this explanation. The fourth beast is a fourth kingdom that will appear on earth. It will be different from all the other kingdoms and will devour the whole earth. None of the kingdoms prior to Daniel had devoured the whole earth. None of the kingdoms today have devoured the whole earth. At least Alexander came up to India. Romans did not come beyond the Euphrates. They were sort of scared of the Parthians. Of course, during the time of the Roman Empire, they did not know about America, neither about Japan or Australia and many parts of China. So the Roman Empire did not devour the whole earth, because some are saying it is that final global empire is the revived Roman Empire. That was only a section, about 1/5 of the whole world, sort of. But the angel clearly says this government, this kingdom will rule the entire world. So that's why we call it the global kingdom. Neither did the British govern the whole earth. They were chased out of America and they did not conquer Russia. So this is the global government that is coming up. That is why at the beginning I pointed out 2 sectors that govern people: the economy and the government. Now, those people, they are called elite, they are called globalists. You have heard certain names like Martin Schwab or Bill Gates or George Soros, but those are not the real leaders either. Real leaders are unseen. They don't come into the limelight. Maybe they were there in the past, like Henry Kissinger, but now they are not in the limelight. So this is what happens, but they have their global agenda. Now they also know if you can control money, you control people and the government. So that's what's happening to the so-called developing countries. And especially by controlling food, you control. So they know they have to control the money, they have to control the food. The Ukrainian war also had something to do with it, but that's a different topic altogether. I'm just pointing out how this global agenda is taking place in our lifetime. So we need to have some understanding or idea about what is happening if we are to face these challenges, at least with some kind of confidence. Now, in the case of Daniel, they had this presentation could not have been Daniel and all. But there was another person about 2000 years back. 600 years practically after Daniel. He was the youngest disciple of Christ. In Hebrew, he is called Yohanan. In many other languages, Johann, and in English, John. Now, he was illiterate, unlike Daniel. Daniel was quite well educated. He was a fisherman. So his school was the Sea of Galilee. And at that time, he lived in Ephesus, which was the capital of Asia, that area that was called Asia at that time. Today, sometimes referring to that, we say Asia Minor, but modern Turkey. That was the capital. So he lived there, and then all the cities, major cities in that capital, in that country, were under the Romans. And Roman Caesars considered themselves to be gods. So they had their statues and temples erected for them and all that. So those people living in those cities, they had to show their allegiance to the ruling Caesar, at least annually, by burning a little bit of incense before that statue or whatever. And those who refused to do that were punished. And most of the Christians were punished that way. That's why the 7 epistles dictated by Christ have relevances to sufferings at various cities, especially like Smyrna. But this guy lived in Ephesus, and because obviously he refused to burn some incense to Domitian, who was the Caesar at that time, John was banished to the Isle of Patmos. While he was there, God gave him a complete picture of what is happening now as well as what would be happening in the future. And it is the most detailed and graphic picture that anyone has about the times that we are in. So he was released afterwards, because the Roman custom was the succeeding Caesar released the prisoners and reversed the decrees of the previous one. So he obviously would have come back to Ephesus. And Paul's disciple Timothy was also there. Maybe they were good friends. It could be that John started narrating what he saw and Timothy could have written down, or someone else. So we have the final book in the Bible called the book of Revelation. In the book of Revelation, of course, we must remember none of the original writers divided what they wrote into chapters and verses. That came much later. But it's easy for us today to refer to certain things, or when preaching or teaching, can give the references so that whoever is studying or listening could turn to those places and see for themselves what is said is true, instead of just believing what someone is telling is true. So, in Revelation chapter 13, I'm reading from verse 1. And I stood on the shore of the sea. Some versions may have and the dragon, but in the original the word dragon is not there, right? So it is okay. John was standing on the shore of the sea. That is what it means is, again, just like Daniel, even at that time, he was shown something that is happening in the international arena. He says, and I saw a beast coming out of the sea, okay, just like Daniel, but not 4 beasts, just 1 beast, and he had 10 horns. Now remember, the one that Daniel saw also had 10 horns, and with crowns on those 10 horns, and on each head a blasphemous name, because this one had 7 heads also. More than the 10 horns, there are 7 heads also on this. So it's different to what Daniel saw. We'll see the difference as we go on. The beast I saw resembled a leopard. Okay, the Greek one. The third one, Daniel saw, but had feet like those of a bear. The second one, Daniel saw, and had a mouth like a lion. The first one, Daniel saw. So Babylonian, Medo-Persian, and Greek characteristics are there, but this is just one beast having those, right? And one of the heads of the beast seemed to have had a fatal wound, but the fatal wound had been healed. Only one head. It had 7 heads, only one head had this fatal wound, not all the 7. The scripture interprets scripture. There are always interpretations given somewhere regarding certain symbols for identification. This John was shown something else, the religious system in Revelation, and he writes them in what we call Revelation 17. I'm reading from Revelation 17 verse 1. One of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and said to me, "Come, I will show you the punishment of the great prostitute who sits on many waters." Now, in scripture, prostitution or harlotry basically means giving someone or something else what belongs to God. It could be worship, honor, reverence, even thanksgiving, praise, what really belongs to God, being given to a person or system or a place. And the Bible refers to as spiritual prostitution or harlotry. Regarding this, who sits on many waters. Now, for that, I will read to you what is written in verse 15 of the same chapter. Then the angel said to me, "The many waters you saw where the prostitute sits are peoples, multitudes, nations, and languages." So you see, religions control the whole world, whatever type of religion. And coming back to verse 2, with her the kings of the earth committed adultery, and the inhabitants of the earth were intoxicated with the wine of her adulteries. That is, people the world over are intoxicated with paganism, what is called paganism, and superstition, spiritism, all kinds of things. Instead of worshipping the true God, everyone worships something or other, whether they know it or not. It could be even a political leader, a system, whatever. Right? So then it says, "Then the angel carried me away in the spirit into a desert, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast." In the Bible, scarlet means sin. That's in Isaiah 1:18, where God says, "Even if your sins are as red as scarlet, I'll make you as white as crimson snow." Scarlet beast that was covered with blasphemous names and had 7 heads and 10 horns. So what John saw coming out of the rising out of the international arena is controlled by this religious system. So in Revelation 17, the angel goes on to say what those 7 heads really mean. And that is there in verses 9 and 10. This calls for a mind with wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 hills on which the woman sits. There are also 7 kings, or the original language also means 7 kingdoms, sovereignties. 5 have fallen, 1 is, the other has not yet come, but when it does come, it must remain for a short time. Okay, now because it says 7 hills something, it is Rome, but there are many other cities like Tokyo and even around Jerusalem there are 7 hills. So it's not geographical hills, because the angel clearly says they represent 7 kingdoms. Now, up to the time of John, 5 had come and gone. Egyptian kingdom, okay, that had many dynasties of pharaohs. And the last one, interestingly, the Ptolemy's kingdom, one of Alexander's generals, he went to Egypt, and from his time onwards, his name was Ptolemy, it was Ptolemy dynasty. Interestingly, the last one, the ruler of that dynasty was Cleopatra the 7th. So everyone knows about Cleopatra, but he was the 7th, Mark Antony and all that. And when Octavius became Augustus Caesar in BC 30, that was the end of the Egyptian Empire. Then Assyrian Empire was there. And Assyrian Empire also continued until it was defeated by Babylonians in 609 BC. That continued until 539-38 in the Gregorian calendar, until it was defeated by Koresh or Cyrus, and Medo-Persian Empire came into existence. And then came Alexander, the Greek Empire, 330 onwards, and after Alexander's death, it got divided into 4 parts, and again the final one was defeated by the Seleucid Empire. The final one was defeated by Augustus, also in 30 BC. So all those kingdoms, empires, had definite years in which those empires were terminated. But historians do not agree as to the Roman Empire. So at the time of John, 5 had fallen. One is, that was the Roman Empire, and one was yet to come, that is the global empire we are having a look at. So it's not geographical hills, the angel clearly says they are empires. Now coming back to Revelation 13, where John gives the description of this one beast having characteristics of the former empires. So Greek Empire, leopard starts with that. Not only speed, it is the Greek culture that controls practically the whole world. Right? The father of Western education, they say, is Plato, Socrates' pupil. Right? So it is the Greek culture, Greek mindset, which is descriptive. That is why any novel written or any book written usually give various descriptions. The biggest difference is Jewish mindset is not descriptive, it is pragmatic. That is why you don't find the color of the hair of Christ or the eyes of Christ are not recorded in the Gospels. Even when it came to that robe he was wearing, John writes, because it was seamless, they cast lots to see who should get it. But if a person with a Greek mindset wrote it, he could have even written, originally this was this color, now it was caked with blood and dust was clinging onto it, all that kind of thing. That is the Greek mindset. Right? So the whole world is controlled by the Greek mindset, except those in the Middle East, and not generally, except for Jews. Then comes at the bear. Koresh or Cyrus was very crafty. And today you can see how crafty various leaders are. And then we know the Roman Empire part is there. The whole world practically is governed by the laws Roman Empire introduced, called Roman Dutch law, even though other countries, democratic countries, are governed by this Roman law. But actually, it is God's law. What was written on the second stone tablet, the 5 commandments from thou shalt not kill onwards, well, all these laws are based on those 5. That's a different topic altogether. Right? And then Babylon spoke like a lion. So that is why there in chapter 17 the angel says, this woman sits on this beast. And 17 verse 5 says, this title was written on that woman's forehead, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes or harlots, and of all the abominations of the earth. So, Babylonianism controls practically the whole world, just like Greek mindset, though most people don't realize. Right? Just to give 2 examples, the world economy is basically related to US economy. United States is the number 1 economy of the world. When you look at the reverse side of $1 bill, what do you see? An Egyptian pyramid, the eye of Horus, and underneath written the letters in Latin, New World Order. What has the US currency got to do with Egyptology? You see, so there's a huge connection. And you may have seen a monument like pillar with a Felix on top in many cities. That also has relevance to Nimrod. So that like that, a lot of people don't realize Babylonianism controls most of the things that go on. So that is what was shown. By the way, regarding that woman being dressed in purple and scarlet, because of that, many people say that is the Roman Catholic Church and Vatican. Well, yes, cardinals and bishops wear robes of those colors. But remember what the angel tells that. The angel tells John. He says, what is shown there is this Babylonianism, this woman controlled all the empires. So at the time of John, there was no Roman Catholic Church as such. And it was not there during the time of Egyptians or Assyrians or Babylonians or Greeks or Medo-Persians. Right? So it is this Babylonianism that controls the whole world. There are elements of Babylonianism like that in practically all religions. Regarding the head that had received a fatal wound and had been attended to, that is the Roman Empire. Historians cannot agree as to when Roman Empire ceased to exist. In fact, they say it never did, and it continued, especially through the judicial system and then through the Vatican and all that. So that is why it had been attended to. But remember, that is only one of the heads. So this entire system consists of 7 empires, characteristics of 7 empires, and it's a global kingdom, not only restricted to Europe or to the former territories of the Roman Empire. Revelation 13 verse 4. Men worship the dragon, that is the devil, because he had given authority to the beast, and they also worshipped the beast and asked, who is like the beast, who can make war against him? Not them or system. Here again, from the system, a shift takes place to a person, the coming global leader. So again, a shift. First, John described the system, global empire, and now the attention is drawn to a single person. Verse 5. The beast was given a mouth to utter proud words and blasphemies and to exercise his authority for 42 months. So this is what Daniel also saw. That horn that came out with the mouth and eyes spoke blasphemies. And as we saw in Daniel 11:36, the king that is coming up will exalt himself above all other gods and including the creator God. Verse 7. He was given power to make war against the saints and to conquer them, and he was given authority over tribes, people, languages, and nation. Then it's all he, not it anymore. And all the inhabitants of the earth worship the beast. So this is the global ruler that is coming through this global empire. Now it says here, verse 7, I just read it, he was given power to make war against the saints. Now the word saints in scripture, mainly you find in the section called New Testament, always refer to those who follow Christ. You don't find the word saints in the writings of Moses. Neither do you find the word saints in the prophecies or the books of the prophets, except Daniel chapter 7 verse 25. That's the only place in the all the prophetic books you find the word saints. I'll just read it to you. Daniel 7:25. He will speak against the Most High and oppress his saints and try to change the set times and the laws. The saints will be handed over to him for a time, times, and half a time. So it's quite clear here. Those who follow Christ will be handed over for time, times, and half a time, which is 3.5 years. And that is what John also writes for 42 months. The word kadoshim in Hebrew, right? Sadiqim is righteous ones. Kadoshim, saints. That's the only place you get the word saints. Now there are various presentations given. Saints will not be here, saints will on all that kind of thing. I'm not giving any opinion, I'm not giving any interpretation, I'm reading to you what is there in black and white in the written scripture. Now verse 8, all the inhabitants of the earth will worship the beast, all whose names have not been written in the book of life belonging to the Lamb that was slain from the creation of the world. So all people will be worshipping, and there is a group that does not worship. That is, true followers of Christ. Now this verse need not be here if true followers are not on this earth. It only should have said all the inhabitants of the earth will worship the beast, that's all. Now the word rest of the saints or rest of the people whose names have not been written in the book of life is also not there. Right? Because there's some people may assume, some people may say, these are those who have been left behind. But this whole chapter speaks about a total. You can ask any linguist to show or to prove that. Okay, and it goes on to say, verse 9, he who has an ear, let him hear. If anyone is to go into captivity he will go. If anyone is to be killed with the sword he will be killed. This calls for patient endurance and faithfulness on the part of the not remaining saints, not some of the saints, but the language is all the saints, that is all who follow Christ. So this is what is happening. A global kingdom is coming that has 10 leaders. right? And three of them will be removed, and then this global ruler will come into existence. Now there's evidence to show that the whole world has been divided into 10 parts, roughly like USA, Canada, United West Indies and all that. USA, Canada, West Indies, that part. Then all of the South American countries, all of the South American countries, then all the African countries, the Middle East, Europe, then former USSR. You see what Putin is doing. Then China, Tibet, Mongolia, all those. Then India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, and all that. Then Asia, Sri Lanka is in Asia. And then Australasia with New Zealand and PNG. So those are the 10 parts. Now before that comes, there will come another war in the Middle East. That war is recorded in Psalms 83, where it is recorded all the countries surrounding Israel will attack Israel. All the ancient names of those countries are there in Psalms 83, except for the word Aram, which was the ancient name for Syria. In Isaiah 17:1, it is recorded, Damascus will be a heap of ruins. Damascus is still there. Homes and various other cities have been attacked, but Damascus is still there. But because Iran sends convoys of arms and ammunition to Hezbollah in Lebanon, Israel keep on attacking those convoys. They're passing through Damascus, sometimes very close to the airport. So it's practically an everyday occurrence, very frequent occurrence. So will one of those destroy Damascus? We don't know. Will some other country attack? We don't know. Or if they have some destructive weaponry there, all of a sudden that explodes, and whether Damascus will be destroyed that way, we don't know. But very clearly it is recorded there, Isaiah 17:1, Damascus will be a heap of ruins and will be called a city no more. Since the capital is gone, that country is not represented. So that is why most probably in Psalms 83 you don't find the word Aram. But when that happens, all the surrounding countries in the Middle East will attack Israel. And then God intervenes. And that brings in a totally different geopolitical scenario. That happened in a way after the 1967 Six-Day War. After that war, the whole political scene in the Middle East changed. But now everything is hotting up, so it appears Psalms 83 war will happen at any time. Before that, Damascus will be a heap of ruins. In Revelation chapter 18, it talks about the city that controls the economy of the whole world burning in 1 hour. So 18:10, 17, 19, all three verses say to burn in 1 hour. Well, you can take a guess as to which city controls the whole economy of the whole world. So with Psalms 83, about Damascus is destroyed, the geopolitical scene of the world will change, but the city that controls the economy of the world, when that is burnt up, the great reset will be in place totally. So that's what is coming. And then the global empire of 10 leaders will come. So there will be a kind of peace in the Middle East, and then 3 leaders will attack Israel again. That's in Ezekiel 38. Russia, European Union headed by Germany. Germany still has the biggest economy in Europe. If not for the fact that after the Second World War, restrictions are put on Germany regarding building another army and developing arms and ammunition, they still would be the biggest military power in Europe. But restrictions are put on, but they are the biggest economy in Europe. And then Middle Eastern leader, Persia, that's what Ezekiel 38 says, and that is Iran today. So those three leaders will attack Israel. Now they obviously are not attacking Israel because in this case they are anti-Semitic or against the Jewish people, but they are coming for the wealth. I'll just read to you before I close, because some people think this war is the next war that will take place in the Middle East. As I pointed out in Psalms 83 war, why the Ezekiel 38 war cannot be the next war in the Middle East. I'll read to you from verse 10, Ezekiel 38:10 onwards. This is what the sovereign Lord says: on that day, thoughts will come into your mind, and you will devise an evil scheme. You will say, I will invade a land of unwalled villages. I will attack a peaceful and unsuspecting people, all of whom living without walls and without gates and bars. That is, no defenses. They are unsuspecting. They are living peacefully. Can you say that is the state of Israel today? Is Mossad unsuspecting? They have so many kinds of weaponry: David sling, Iron Dome, Arrow 18. And recently they developed under laser type of weaponry. They have defensive mechanisms other countries yearn for. And they, even last Sunday morning, there was an attack in Jerusalem. Right? Some people in a bus were killed. So like that, you cannot say they are living peacefully. So the Psalms, Ezekiel 38, what takes place when they are living peacefully, without defenses, unsuspecting. Right? So that will come after the Psalms 83 war. The world government consisting of 10 rulers will be in place. Verse 12, I will plunder and loot and turn my hand against the resettled ruins and the people gathered from the nations, rich in livestock and goods, living at the center of the land. So Jewish people have been gathered from various countries. They are still coming. It was a desolate land full of ruins. They made it a modern country within 70 years, and they will have a lot of riches. So these people are coming to plunder. And then the rest of that chapter clearly shows how God comes again with earthquakes, hailstorms and all, and destroy that army, and it will take Israel 7 months to bury them. That is there in chapter 39 of Ezekiel verse 11 onwards. But 39:9 says, for 7 years they will burn the weapons of that army for fuel. The 7-year period is there. Now that is what Daniel 9:27 speaks about. This coming global leader will confirm a peace treaty, it says, with many for 7 years. So out of the 10, 3 are gone. So with the balance 7 leaders, this person will confirm a peace treaty, and that 7-year period is there in Ezekiel 39:9, for during which time Ezekiel says they will burn various weaponry for fuel. So something is going to happen to oil too. Well, there seems to be signs already, right? So that is another topic altogether. So this is what will happen, and that's when this global leader will come into position. That's why Daniel 7:8 says, out of the 10 horns, 3 will be removed when this horn with the mouth and eyes come up. And 7:22-23, the angel says, this global empire will have 10 kings or rulers. 3 of them will be removed before this one speaking blasphemies would come up. So what Daniel saw, John confirms. And Ezekiel also gives indications about all those. So that's what will happen. So this is briefly what the scriptures show. Because this video is getting longer than I thought, I'll stop now. You can do your own research. Please read your Bibles. Read more than one version, because translators also at times were limited. Their knowledge was limited. Remember, King James Version is only 411 years old. It was released only 1611. Right? But anyway, more information is there now in some other translations. So please refer. But most of all, ask God to show you what the truth is. There may be people who listen to this who may not believe in the God, but you can see clearly a fisherman, uneducated, had written what is happening in the world today in the words he could use. Even Einstein or Isaac Newton would not have been able to use modern words if God gave them this kind of visions, right? But this man has done, so it's for us to identify what is being written there with the help of God Almighty or Spirit, Holy Spirit. And main thing is this, how to face this. First, we all must acknowledge that we are perfect. Tell God, I'm sorry, whether you believe in Him or not. He say, okay, there's a God, I know I'm not perfect, but challenging times are coming. I don't know how to face them. So forgive me my sins and help me to rectify them. And if you want, you can take a step further and say, okay, Christ, you are crucified on the cross. I don't know why, but if there's anything I can regain, I can gain out of that, I'm willing to experience. Because there are Jewish people who have accepted Yeshua is their promised Messiah or Messiah, but majority have not. But they will accept this global leader because when these three armies attack them, they are living peacefully, there's no help whatsoever, and then God destroys that army. This person will present himself, will say, I am the Messiah or Messiah that you have been waiting for, and they will gladly accept him. And as recorded by Daniel and as written by Paul, when he goes to the third temple that will be built and sit there, as 2 Thessalonians 2:4 says, and declare him to be God, just confirming what Daniel has written in chapter 11 verse 36, then only their eyes would be open. But those who are Jews or Gentiles, you all can cry unto the Almighty God and say, I want to know the truth, please show me. He will. Yes. Until we meet again next time, I will talk about the balance of chapter 13, where this religious leader called the false prophet will do his part. Shalom.